And there's battleground states that I'm just going, wait, what? Like with Ted Cruz's race in the Senate.
Yeah, who would have ever thought that would be so close? So my number 2 priority right now, my number 1 priority is representing the people of the 2nd district. Well, my number 2 priority, very close behind, is holding the majority, because what happens in November is going to have a big impact for a long time on this country. And because our generals in Utah aren't that bad, I'm spending some time in other states trying to help voters there know how important it is that we have the majority. And it's just always nice to have somebody who's not you tell your constituents what you're doing in Congress. So I'm going to go.
I love it. And New Mexico, are you going to, is it rural communities you're going to, or you can express what you've gone through here?
Yeah. New Mexico's a funny state because they're an oil and gas state, but they vote blue. And so I'm going to help make the case that they have natural resources issues. They need us.
You have an urban center and nothing else.
I know, but almost every Western state is that way.
No, well, okay. Nevada.
Yeah, went blue, but I think we're
Arizona.
We're going to get Arizona back. Maybe not
Arizona and New Mexico all went blue. And that's because everyone lives in 3 urban cities.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
New Mexico, everyone lives in 2.
Mm-hmm.
Nevada, everyone lives in 2.
Yep.
Really one. But that's the split. It's right now the lines have been drawn. It's urban and rural.
Yeah. But the thing with these Western states that have gone gone blue is that they used to vote red.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gone blue because of, blue collar workers and unions and immigrants, people who are kind of drawn to the Democrat Party because of social programs.
Third word you said is the dominant reason.
And
Soros.
Those voters are starting to realize that all the things that they were promised by the Democrats aren't actually coming true.
Nor have they ever.
Yeah. And we have better policies that, make their lives better. And so I think we're getting these Western states back. They're back in play.
Well, our state party has actually gone knocking on doors in both Nevada and Arizona recently.
Yeah.
And for that very reason, to preserve the Senate and the House. Well, to get the Senate, and then preserve the House.
For anyone who's listening, thank you for doing that. It really does make a big difference. I was in Arizona at the end of that. I was there on the Sunday and did the Trump rally and the, Mormons for Trump fireside thing. And it really does energize those swing states when people will go and knock doors and talk to people face to face. So thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone in Utah who put in the time to do that.
And that LDS for Trump event that you went to, what I'm hearing is that you were quite remarkable. It was kind of a little crazy and you were awesome.
It was partly my fault that it was crazy. This was one of those campaign season just gets weird. Campaigns get weird. Everybody gets tired and frantic. And anyway, I had agreed to be part of it. And they sent me a link for logging in, but they also kept asking us to promote it on social media. And I was on the road. I was in 5 states that week, and that was at the end of the week. And I was tired. My chief of staff was tired. So we sent the link to our campaign team and said, will you put this on social media so people will log in? And we sent my link, like the presenter link. So I was sitting on that fireside.
The presenter.
And they had spelled my name wrong. So I could tell which one was the real me because I corrected the spelling of my name, but there were like 65 people logged on at one point with my name, which meant they could unmute themselves. They could turn on their cameras.
And they probably had to go through and flush all that out.
They did. So if you went through my social media and you got kicked off in the middle, I apologize. I did try to get them. They said, well, we're going to kick everybody off. I said, why don't you go in the chat and post the right link so that they can just go click on it and get on. And for some reason they didn't do that.
See, that's why we vote for people like you, because that's just called logic, common sense.
Well, after I, illogically, not common sense, sent them the presenter link. So I apologize to anyone who logged on with my link and then got kicked off too.
Well, that would happen.
In 2024, though, we've all been using Zoom for a long time. I should be better at it than that.
Well,
in 2020, we were all making those mistakes.
And I recognize why they wanted you to share it for obvious reasons, because you've got another reach above theirs or outside of theirs. So I understand that. But things like that happen, and you've been blowing the doors off of traveling everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm back on the road again tomorrow.
This is crazy.
Really?
What's it like in the heat? This is your first first November ticket that
Yeah.
is you've served now.
Yeah.
You've run a full campaign, not without a lot of ups and downs and crazy.
Sure.
And you got the people's vote,
Yeah.
gone through a recount. You've
I'm hardened now. I'm
Right?
not boot anymore.
You're the Iron Lady.
Yeah.
So
No, it's, you asked what's it like?
yeah.
It is actually really cool to go to these swing states and talk to voters we are so lucky in Utah. I mean, we have our problems politically, we have our differences and, but we still have a supermajority. And that is a whole different world than what these swing states are dealing with. And what I learned, especially in Wisconsin and Iowa,
Yeah.
where not only do we have swing House districts, but they're swing states for the presidential election, they are so tired. They've been getting inundated with the presidential race for 8 months now.
Yeah.
And
they
I was
probably
sitting,
want a Serta commercial.
They do. That's what I was going to tell you. I was sitting at a VFW on a Friday night for a Friday night fish fry in Wisconsin.
Sounds delicious.
I don't actually eat fish, but it was really fun. And I did eat fish that night because that's how much I care about Derek Van Orden.
You don't eat fish.
I don't.
Why?
I grew up in a really dry part of the country, and I just
You
don't eat
think,
things that swim.
you'd think you'd want more of it.
No, I conserve water. I eat cows
Have you
and pigs.
had crab?
I have, but I ate halibut that night. That's how much I want to
Wow.
help my
Good
buddy
fish.
Derek Van Orden. And the PGA Tour was going on here in Utah, down in Black Desert. And so I was sitting there, and I was, talking to people at this VFW in Wisconsin, and they'd say, "Where's your district?" And I would point at the screen where the PGA Tour was on and say, "That's my district right there." And
That
it
and
just
the
looked
little
stunning.
north.
Yeah. But because I was kind of keeping an eye on that screen, I noticed every single commercial was a presidential commercial, a Senate commercial, because they have Hovde trying to flip that Tammy Baldwin seat, or a congressional race commercial. And if you can imagine having had that going on for months, there were middle-aged ladies coming in and flipping off my colleague, Derek Van Orden. I mean, he is a veteran. He's a Navy SEAL commander.
At the VFW of all
At
places.
the VFW in his district. And it was just like, people there are crabby and testy, and they've been through a lot of campaigning.
Why has politics gotten this detestable?
That's an open-ended question.
I think, now I'm not an expert on, human behavior. So if the callers want to come in and correct me, that's great. But I think people are really crabby right now. They're sort of testy right now because things are changing. We can all feel that something's changing, and it's scary. I still think we're changing in the right direction. And people think I'm nuts when I say this, but here's my argument. So I know the Biden administration has not been good for us. A Harris administration would be a disaster.
What? Tell me more.
But
Well, and the economy, people are affected. Like that'll make you crabby right there if you can't
Yeah.
pay your bills.
yeah, when your paycheck's not going far enough, you get testy. But underneath all of that, we have the Supreme Court overturning the Chevron case and saying that the court doesn't owe deference to.
That was fantastic. That was the best decision
Yeah.
the Supreme Court had ever made.
And it's so much bigger than I think most people realize yet.
Okay, Democrats, listen, do you like democracy? Do you like it that people you vote for actually have imposition on how you live your life? Or do you want it so that people you don't vote for,
Yeah.
bureaucrats who are hired and sleaze their way up through the ranks, have the imposition on your life?
People who have political theories but are not accountable to the public are making most of the decisions. Most of the things we think of as laws coming out of Washington, D.C. are actually rules or regulations coming out of an agency that have the force of law. And the Supreme Court just undercut all of that.
They should have done it in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, so the Chevron case was
Came
decided
in
in the 80s,
81 or
84. So it was
84,
40 years old. But yeah, the bureaucratic state started in the 40s.
Yeah.
This is an 80-year problem in the making. So there are very few
40s,
people left.
The teens, this was the dream of Woodrow.
Sure, Woodrow Wilson started the progressive movement, but the New Deal alphabet soup agencies
So we can see ourselves.
are the ones that we're still, dealing with every day, that have gotten bigger, gotten stronger. And so we have an opportunity right now to roll a lot of that back. And, Roe v. Wade's been overturned, and we've got, even Democrats out campaigning on permit reform because the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed and it's hard to rebuild.
Yeah.
And So I think we are actually moving towards smaller, more accountable government and more individual freedom. And I think we're going to end up in a place that we'll all be a lot happier with. But I think people are crabby because they can't see that yet. What they see is we have too much government. We're paying for too much government. We have too much interference in our lives. And that government interference is causing a lot of the social problems that we spend a lot of time fighting about. But those problems are actually an outgrowth of too much government. And I think we're moving towards less government, more individual freedom. And I think we're going to end up in a good place. I'm also going to predict that the process is going to scare a lot of people. Because no matter how much you think you like individual freedom, if you're 80 years
It's
old,
messy.
you don't remember a time before the New Deal. If you've been working for 40 years, you don't remember a time before Chevron deference. So it's something that we all want, but it's something we're not used to. And I tell the story all the time, and I hope my niece never watches your podcast, but I was staying at my brother's house for Christmas a few years ago. My niece, who's now a teenager, was just a toddler, and they started potty training her during Christmas break while we were there. And after the first day of potty training, she was so emotionally exhausted. She went and climbed on her mom's lap and started bawling, "I want my diapers back. I just want my diapers back." And I suspect that a lot of Americans are going to be a little bit like that. We're not used to this kind of responsibility and this kind of freedom. And when we get our first taste of it, or as we start getting more and more of it, I think some people are going to get scared. I think they're going to get emotionally exhausted and they're going to want their diapers back.
I just heard a wedding toast.
I was going to say, I heard someone say on Carlson or Tucker Carlson recently that regardless of how the vote goes in November, if we do get the win, which when we get the win, I'm hopeful, but how do we deal with a society that is mentally ill? Either way, How do you get what does it look like if Kamala wins?
Start putting Xanax in the water.
And what does it look like if she loses?
Yeah.
Because both sides are so hyper political now.
Yeah.
And, if Texas is a swing state, when I was in Texas, it was constant commercials and everything else. And I'm like, if Texas is on the chopping block, what happens if Kamala somehow pulls out a win? And there are questionable counties again, like what happened in 2020. What does the right do? And then if they win, if Trump wins handedly, what does the left do?
I don't know. I wish I had the answer to both of those questions. I do think asking both of those questions is the right thing. When I was on the road a week ago, I was with one of my colleagues in a swing state, and he said, everybody keeps asking, what are Republicans going to do if Trump loses? He said, I think everyone forgets about what happened when Trump won.
Yep.
In 2016, there were riots in DC. He said, I had people come to DC for the inauguration who will never come back to Washington, DC. They got threatened. They were, and people forget about like the cabinet members in the Trump administration who couldn't go out to eat.
Right.
They'd get shouted out of restaurants.
Senators too.
And so what's going to happen? I don't know. What needs to happen? We need to all grow up.
Amen.
We need to grow up and accept outcomes. And we need to be able to function in a world where everything's not going our way. And if, I do think Trump's going to win. And when he wins, we don't need to have riots in the streets in DC. The whole world is still watching us. So this is one of the things that has really surprised me as a member of Congress. I've done some traveling internationally, and every country I've gone to, they talk about our elections. We are still the standard for the world.
And they're all having political strife too.
Yeah.
Every country is. And you know what it is? I've said this on the show before, so now it's just your turn to hear it. The Gutenberg press has been invented.
That happened a while ago.
Yeah.
Well, it's the internet.
Yeah.
And now the Catholic Church is breaking in half. And that's where we're at.
But that led us to good places.
It did.
And
it took a
that's kinda
30
what
years
I'm getting
war.
at.
That was the craziest war Europe had ever seen. Not the bloodiest, just the weirdest.
And so I think the process is actually going to hurt a little.
Yeah.
Like, getting us back to where we need to be isn't going to look pretty all the time. And we're going to have to keep our eye on the end result. We're going to have to keep reminding ourselves and each other the individual freedoms and balance.
And accountability.
Accountability, transparency, balance between the branches, balance between the federal and state governments is worth what it's going to cost us, because I think there's going to be a lot of crying, and I want my diapers back along the way.
Yeah, I hope the nation survives this.
You know what this is
We will.
reminding me of is the conversation we had earlier in the year regarding votes. And you said that the Congress needs to set itself up to prepare for a Trump reelection. And I mean, it's all tied in there.
Yep.
If Congress has done what it can so that when Trump is elected, we don't do what we did in 2016 and the
Right.
party implodes.
Yeah.
And they pick their side against our president. We have to unite. It might get expensive in order to get less expensive. It might take a number of hearings of government entities to get rid of the bureaucrat problem. And I don't know if we could do it in 4 years, but I sure as heck hope he gets in there and gets rid of some problems.
Yeah.
Is he going to give it to Vivek and Elon and just? I would just
I don't
let the
know.
leash off those guys.
I think he might. I mean, Trump is
That
a
would
business
be the
guy. He
wrecking
thinks
ball.
like a
Elon
business
mentioned
guy.
in a speech I just heard that he would go in and help with the government auditing. I mean,
Yeah, he's
he
calling
just
it
said that.
Doge.
But the thing is, we don't even need it. Congress can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're accountable to the people. We can do it. We just have to do it.
Well, that is true, but in some ways, your hands are tied.
Well, they have
Maybe.
subpoena power.
Whereas an outside entity to come in and do a different type of audit.
So
Well-
I would make the argument that the entity that should be doing the auditing and should be doing the changing is Congress, because we're accountable.
It should.
It should be, but it hasn't been. Oh, you
No.
guys have been. Okay, I have to say this. The last 2 years, man, we've seen Biden laptop, we've seen FBI whistleblowers, we've seen a ton of committees and a lot of information and the Twitter files and even, Facebook and the FBI wrongdoing. But that's where it just stops. Without the Senate,
Yeah.
we need down ticket, folks, because if the Congress can do their job and do these committees and get this information out to the American people, the Senate can then write laws.
Yeah.
And the president can push it.
And we've been passing laws and corrections to these problems out of the House, and they just don't get taken up in the
Right.
Senate. So we need to have partners in the Senate to work on this. But I came here in a good mood, I guess. I keep wanting to give you guys some optimism because I feel like I'm always bringing bad news. But I've been listening. I do a lot of driving and a lot of flying, and so I burn through a lot of audiobooks. So I've been listening to a history of the United States lately that's long. So
As
I
long
chose
as it's
it 'cause
not the people's history.
it is
okay with
not.
it. Thank you.
But
You probably got forced to listen to that every year in college, but
no, I actually didn't. Ag majors don't really have to read.
Oh,
thick
that's
books like
true.
that.
dirt doctors
we'll
don't
learn how
have
to
to
Craig
listen
check
to
cows and stuff.
Zen.
Yeah.
Call
I
me
can-
moron.
I can castrate a sheep, but I didn't have to read Zen. No, it's been interesting to me in this current, political environment during this election season, listening to like the 1824 election, the one that was 200 years ago. That's when John Quincy Adams got elected.
Mhm.
And, there were 4 guys running, and Andrew Jackson won the popular vote by a plurality, but didn't win by a majority. And so they had to have a runoff basically in the electoral college. So there were 4 guys in the race, 2 of them dropped off. Then it's between John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson.
Yep.
Well, Henry Clay, Speaker of the House, goes and flips a bunch of electors for John Quincy Adams.
Yep.
John Quincy Adams wins, becomes president, and makes Henry Clay his Secretary of State. And there were riots.
Yeah.
People in rural areas and across the South were rioting and saying, the election was stolen. There were shenanigans. And I thought, wait a minute, this
There's nothing
sounds-
new under the sun.
No, there's nothing new under the sun. And he served 1 term and it was kind of a disaster. Andrew Jackson won in a landslide in the next election, and the Republic held. And just this morning, driving up, I was listening to, the post-Civil War Reconstruction era, and, what was happening on the federal level, where we couldn't even decide whether states should be represented at the federal level and what votes were legal. And again, there's nothing new under
Is
the
this
sun.
Johnston or Grant era?
Both. I listened
Both?
to the end of the Johnson era and the beginning of
They're
the Grant
both
era.
crazy eras.
And like maybe the Grant era never should have happened. It's kind of hard to say which votes should have been counted and which ones weren't in the Reconstruction era. And yet we're about to celebrate our 250th anniversary as a country. And so we've been through hard times. We've been through some really legitimate questions about what's right and wrong, but we've managed to hold together as a nation. And the
Well-
Civil War was the hardest thing we've ever been through as a nation. We're still here.
Yeah.
Our Constitution is designed to, work under a lot of different circumstances. We can go through a lot of different questions. I think we're going to be okay. We just have to stay in it.
Have
We
you
have to stay
ever-
involved.
Have you ever heard the theory of the life cycle of empires?
Yes, but I think you should recap it for the listeners who haven't.
The theory is that an empire can last 250
Genius.
years max.
Yeah.
That's and everyone who studied
250
empires,
is the number, isn't it?
I think
every-
it's 200-ish.
200 to 250, but 250 is their max. And everyone who studied it, and then people go, what about Rome? Okay, you got the Roman kingdom.
Yep.
You've got the Roman Republic, and each one of them lasts 250 years. Then you've got the Roman Empire,
Mhm.
and then you break it, you've got Eastern Rome and Western Rome.
Yeah.
And each one died. Greece was 228 years.
Okay, you're just bringing us down.
So
No,
the question is did our empire start when
David says we're not an empire.
at the end of the Civil War, or did it start now that we've gained this unipolar monopoly? When did that start?
I think it's right
Or
in the
has it started yet?
Constitution.
I think that you're not counting on American exceptionalism. And I think we're going to outlive everyone's expectations.
I hope so.
Right, because the document, the Constitution,
Yes.
if a moral people, mind you, we do require that. That document can be. It is the cornerstone of a society that can work.
And that's why I say we have to stay involved. My biggest fear right now for this country is that people will get frustrated. People like the people I saw in those swing states who are tired. People like I see here in Utah who, we've got a super majority and we end up fighting our own team all the time.
Oh yeah,
And people they're frustrated. They're mad. Sometimes they're old wounds and bitterness that people are holding on to. And my fear is that people will walk away. They'll say, I'm done. I don't want to be involved anymore. And our system only works if people are involved. If we can stay involved, we can fix a lot of problems. I mean, slavery is a stain on our history. We spilled a lot of American blood to
Right.
bring that to an end, but we managed to hold together as a republic. We got through 2 world wars. We got through a Great Depression. We got through those early years as a republic where we didn't know what it meant to be America yet. And we had to figure a lot of things out. I think we've still got it in us if we stay engaged, if we stay involved, if people keep showing up. What I'm afraid of is that we are going to willingly walk away from our own system. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at with the history of empires. Usually
Well,
when you've been powerful for a while, you start to take it for granted.
no,
And most of those empires, at least I've only read other people's commentaries on it. I've never actually read it, but it's not that somebody else comes in and conquers them. I don't think anyone's going to come in and conquer us.
you die from within.
Yeah.
Yes.
a party
And the
divided.
saying is empires die when they're led by bureaucrats and eunuchs.
Yeah. So
Now
we
tell me
need to
about our
claw back
government
here.
right now.
I don't know.
Anybody?
I don't know how many eunuchs we have, but we have way too much bureaucracy.
Well, I mean,
Amen.
there was that one eunuch in the old airport stealing ladies' luggage thing, but
I don't even dare comment on that
Nope,
one.
I wouldn't either.
But-
I would.
But we do have too much bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is we're calcifying. 100 years ago, we built enormous dams, and we innovated and we
Innovation,
figured out
yeah.
ways to do things. And now we permit ourselves to death and don't do things.
yeah, we're regulated out of existence.
Yeah, and
As a
I
small
think,
business owner, I can say that
Yeah.
definitively.
and every one of these regulations comes from someone who thinks they're going to make your life easier, or at least keep you safe from something.
Mhm.
So they create a program, they create a permit, they create a hoop you have to jump through. But what government never has to do, that you have to do as a business owner, when you spend resources on something, you have to go back and look at it and
Justify
say,
it.
did what I spent offset a cost? And we don't do that as government. So we may do something to you as a small business owner that is going to prevent some remote, very small harm, but we saddle you with a huge cost. And we don't go back and fix that. But we've got an opportunity right now. The Supreme Court cleared the field for us with Chevron.
Mhm.
We've got Democrats who are worried about a strong executive because they don't like Trump, and they're sick and tired of permitting because they can't get that bridge rebuilt. Republicans tend to distrust a strong executive naturally, and we don't like all the permitting and the red tape naturally. Right now, we're lined up.
Right.
We've got a lane. If we take this opportunity, I think we can make sure that we get well past 250 years. If we don't take this opportunity, we might be in trouble.
Well, that was the greatest thing Trump did. Everyone has their own declarations, but the greatest thing he did was rolling back of regulations, what little he could do.
Yeah, well, in the Supreme Court that decided that case, we can thank Trump for that.
Well, yeah, the Chevron deference. And I'm going to say that the, what's the Roe versus Wade case called? It's it's got a name. But
Yeah, it
anyways,
does.
sending it back to the states is constitutionally correct.
Yeah.
Because then we're supposed to be a melting pot. If you want to have abortions up to 36 months after they're born or whatever, move to a state that allows
That's
that.
not an abortion. That's just murdering a toddler.
So is abortion.
Fair
If
enough.
you want to have stronger restrictions, move to a state that have it. Or if you are apathetic on the questions of abortions, stay where you are. Choose.
But that's the Constitution that works. And yes, we need to get back down to the basics. And here's my fear. My fear is that, ultimate power overpowers ultimately, or whatever that.
Yeah. Power
So-
corrupts, ultimate power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So absolute power
Absolutely.
corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
This is where we're at. I've seen it in our own Republican Party. I mean, right now in our state, we've got infighting just
Yeah.
on the races in the governor's race, for example. And people aren't grasping the fact that there's too much to risk if we cannot unite
Yeah.
and fix it so that, okay, we know there's problems here. We have to unite behind it. We got to get our win, and then let's fix it. And if
Yeah.
people aren't willing to fix it, they're gone next time.
Yep.
But instead of, well, let's just go at each other's throats till we lose.
Yeah.
And ultimately we lose for years, if
Yeah.
not decades, if
Yeah.
not everything. I mean, we could change. Utah's sitting pretty well right now in the
Yeah.
country.
No, we're blessed to be in a state where we actually have a Republican majority, and we're arguing about degrees of how conservative we should be.
Yeah.
There are other states that would love to have that problem.
Like Goth's at the weird goth dance club who has the blackest fishnets on.
Yeah, or the best eyeliner,
Oh yeah, the thickest
David's asking, how about the Sedition Act?
Alien Sedition Act.
Well, it was
That
never
was
constitutional.
okay. Very unconstitutional. It was written by a guy who threw a senator in jail because he called him fat. The Alien Sedition Act was there because they were afraid of Frenchmen going to bringing their civil war over to us after we just fought. Technically, it would have been a civil war, but it became a revolutionary war because we won. They were just afraid of the French coming over. That's all it was about. And then that carried on and charged a lot of people illegally and extrajudiciously.
And funnily
throughout
enough,
time.
I was just talking about John Quincy Adams becoming the president. That one was signed by his dad,
Yep,
John
his
Adams,
father, John Adams,
who
his
was one of our
rotundity,
Yes.
one of our founding fathers,
Our
who knew
second
better.
president, first vice
who
president.
preached against it
Yeah.
and then preached against it after, right before he died.
Yeah. So even the people who gave us the Constitution struggled with living with the amount of freedom
Mhm.
it gave us. What we're going through is not new.
No,
It is tough to live as a free nation. The New Hampshire live free or die sounds like a mantra of, I'm going to die if I can't live free. But it also, those are our only options. We can either live free or die. And sometimes people choose death.
yeah, it's
with-
terrifying to
Living
be
free
free.
is tough. And so that's another thing I like to remind people of. It's not that the founding fathers all agreed on everything, and it's not that they knew exactly how to implement the Constitution from day one, and now we're struggling. It's always been a struggle. The struggle itself is actually important. That's part of being free. We have to embrace the struggle. We have to have these big debates. I do speak English fairly well most of the time. We have to be engaging with each other on what is the right balance of power between the feds and the states. What's the right balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches? These aren't things that are new to our generation,
No.
and they're not things we're going to solve definitively. Having that back and forth and that tug and pull is the point. That's where we protect individual freedom. When all of the different levels and branches of government are fighting each other for power, none of them can get strong enough to become tyrants. It is the struggle that keeps us
And
free.
the people have to give it up. I mean, they have to give up their power because the people have to stop engaging. They have to stop just caring about the government, and that's how their government grows beyond
Yeah.
itself. And these conversations need to happen maybe not on a debate stage, but with your neighbor, because we need to look in each other's eyes, because the internet has made it so you can be anybody anytime and have these fights. But I'm still baffled by the fact that our founding fathers were so young.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine our Gen Zers starting a country? And yet our founding fathers were 19, 20, 21, 30.
Yeah.
Like
Benjamin
they were
Franklin
so
was older,
young.
but none of them had ever lived in a constitutional
Yeah, he was
republic.
older, and he heck of a womanizer for his age.
But
Even
I'm
the
saying,
French
do you see
women.
what I'm saying?
Well, it's not
Can
just
you
that. But
imagine having to start a country?
No.
And not only that, but you're risking blood and treasure on against a king, because people inherently want a leader.
Yeah.
They want a king.
Yeah.
And God said,
And people want to be
be
safe.
your own self. Freedom is the ultimate gift.
yes, Hamilton did want a king.
And right now, when
But
you
everybody
say
loves Hamilton now because of the musical.
people want to be safe, right now, the FBI has just come out with the real numbers for sexual assaults and for violent crime.
I haven't seen
And
it.
it is way higher.
They had to
Just
remember
like
how
Trump said.
they've been claiming that crime went down there. No,
Yeah.
No, 30%,
it was.
40%.
Remember, you know
It
how
was
the
a summary
jobs.
fact check.
You know how the
by,
jobs works. The
yeah.
job numbers.
Yeah.
They lied about the
Flip
job
'em.
numbers. And this is the thing. In America right now, we're agreeing on we need more safety.
Mm-hmm.
We are agreeing on the economy's not working for us. The regulations are ridiculous, and we really do have inflation. And immigration is not working. We need reform. The two parties are agreeing on this.
Yeah.
But the people in power are not.
Yeah.
And yet our neighbors are feeling that.
So I think we're probably going to end up with another closely divided government. I'm optimistic that we'll have the White House, the House, and the Senate, but we'll have it with
From your
really
lips.
small margins. And so I think those are probably the only things we can accomplish. The things that there's pretty widespread agreement on. Get the border under control. That one,
I think the Democrats are
crime
on
under
board with
control,
that
too.
now too.
Yeah, I
But,
think
but
so
I'm
too.
glad they didn't pass that stupid bill that would have made more judges. Because let's face it, when was the last time a government institution got smaller?
They don't, and that's why.
Ever.
So the thing I talk about all the time is this. We need to claw back this bureaucracy that we have, and people talk about drain the swamp. They talk about the deep state. It's all the same problem.
Yep.
The swamp, the deep state, the imbalance. It's all, we have too many bureaucrats who are unelected and unaccountable running everything in our country. And most of what people think of as like law isn't actually law. It didn't pass through Congress.
It's policy
It was-
out of a bureaucracy.
Yeah. And now we enforce it. Oh my gosh, I just saw the time. I was supposed to be gone 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Is there, now that I'm already late, I'll be a couple minutes later. Is there one other thing you guys want
I
to
just,
talk about?
I want to talk a fun subject.
Okay.
So
Yes.
you've been in there. What's it like during an election when you're kind of established in there? How is it? How's the temperature when you're there
Yeah.
in the Capitol?
Well, I don't know how established I am. I'm still not even a year in, but it is much less scary in some ways facing an election when you can see, the people I work with, my colleagues in Congress, for the most part, are really interesting, really dynamic people who want to do what's best for this country. Sometimes the conclusions we come to as a group are idiotic, but the individual members are just so fascinating and hardworking as individuals that it makes me feel, I think this is part of the reason I'm so optimistic about our future, because I think we have a deep bench. I think we can keep sending people to Washington who want to preserve the Constitution, who actually believe in individual liberties. And I think we have people right now who are willing to break stuff and build it back better.
Do you have Democrats?
That phrase is
that
kind of
phrase.
ruined,
But do you have Democrats in Congress that truly you feel love the Constitution and believe it can stand on its own 2 feet?
I think there are some. I don't think the people who make the big headlines care that much about it, but I definitely, when I'm in my committees and I see my Democrat colleagues questioning witnesses, they don't like government overreach either. They're also getting testy about why is this agency doing something that's outside of its power. And so, yeah, I am still optimistic. I think we've got this in us. I do not think we're a dying empire. I think it felt like that when we were watching President Biden on a stage looking senile. It felt like we were a dying
You
empire.
mean like yesterday?
But when we saw Trump on a stage with his fist in the air and blood running down his face, I didn't feel like we were a dying empire anymore. And if he's willing to fight for it, I'm willing to fight for it. If you guys are willing to fight for it, I think the people who listen to you are willing to fight for it. And as long as we're willing to fight for it, I think we can save it. And on that note, I do have to leave. Thank you so much for always letting me come on your show.
Oh my gosh, please come again
Yep.
when you're done, traveling all over. And thanks for doing that. We need it.
We'll see you guys Friday.
See you Friday.